Welcome back to Torchbearers by College Esports News. My name is Kenneth and on this show, we talk with those carrying the flame of college esports at programs across the continent to learn from their expertise in a particular segment of our vast ecosystem. The team behind Torchbearers is stoked to be back, bringing you another batch of episodes this fall, and we couldn't ask for a better guest to get us started. Torchbearers as a concept has always been about highlighting interesting perspectives from those carrying the flame of college esports. On this episode, I have the pleasure of talking to perhaps the Prometheus of that very flame himself, the godfather of collegiate esports, Kurt Melcher. Our conversation centered on what the early days of this space was like, just over a decade ago, and what his team at Robert Morris were able to build with no guidebook whatsoever. Despite how quickly our industry moves, this conversation was a great reminder that things were not all that different at the institutional level a decade ago in comparison to now. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Kurt. Well, Kurt, thanks so much for joining us on Torchbearers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Great guest to have back for our first episode back on this one. Really excited, looking forward to our conversation. The first thing I'd like to ask all of our guests, because I believe it sets up the framing for how you think about problems right now, is what's the one thing that's top of your mind, like the first action item when you get back into work?
Boy, the first action item. It really is finishing kind of a recap of a project that I just finished. So just sort of this is the pieces and parts that were part of the deliverables and how they performed and that sort of stuff. So, it's always a little sad going back because everything you did. You have to then kind of go put it all together, but that's just kind of like client service. So it's not my favorite part of the job. And I wish there would be an AI built that can just service that, but probably is. I just don't know about it. But so that's all. That's what I'm thinking about.
And for those that might be unfamiliar, you're still at Intersport, right? Or
No, I have a consulting company, VGIQ.
Gotcha.
I'd say most of the work still comes from Intersport, whether that's gaming, esports, anything sort of influencer related. Kind of gets. I'm not the sole operator of that, but and then other platforms, other brands, other entities, some of the Scholastic still just kind of consult or broker relationships, those sort of things.
Right. Good deal. Other thing I like to hear from all of our guests is where's your origin story begin? So what got you into video games in the first place? And then how did you make the transition over to the competitive side of esports?
Yeah, like all of us kind of in the industry, I loved playing video games way back then, right? Oh, wow, that's so novel. I
Yeah.
can't believe that. You don't say. And I probably loved it more than others in my peer group, and was just enamored with the early console systems, and then Commodore and Apple II, and moving on to PC, that Ultima Online and Ultima and StarCraft and just all the games that we all love, right, and poured hundreds of hours into. And it's just been, that interactive storytelling has such depth to me, such meaning, right? It holds a higher level of just entertainment. It's like when you come out of a movie crying. Like I've cried at playing video games sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I'm not embarrassed to say so either. When my horse died in Red Dead Redemption 2, I was almost at tears, right? It was the worst part of that game. I put so much time into my horse and like grooming and everything. It felt like a part of me.
Yeah.
But that, and then on the competitive side of gaming, like just, I felt like I was pretty good at some games, but just, you get humbled along the line somewhere, and just seeing the insane skill level of players that come up against, and then you watch pro and you're like, my God, how is that even possible? How is that humanly possible? And again, I came from like Brood War, and you're just like, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, like when you see like the Korean play, it's like
Yep.
impossible. Anyway, so that's kind of my, and like I've always loved. And then on the other side, I was involved in athletics my whole life, as well as my sport was soccer. So played, high school, and then Division I college, and then coached, and been
Yeah.
involved in the sport in a lot of different ways. And that was kind of the merger.
So a natural intersection,
Yeah,
as it
right.
kind of turns out. That's awesome. So first of all, we're going to talk about kind of the history, obviously.
Sure.
Take us back to 2014.
Yep.
What was the landscape like back then? And obviously, how did that first conversation kind of start happening at your institution at the time, Robert Morris?
Yeah, the landscape was, you know, 100% sort of club based. When I say landscape, right, like say collegiate or scholastic, was
Yeah.
100% sort of just student club facing. Rarely even had, I think, any kind of formal designation of club, or some, maybe Texas A&M, like where some of the work Dylan did was able to kind of put on major events, but I wouldn't say he had a whole ton of support from the institution. It was just um, the effort of the students on campus. And on the competitive side was really like Collegiate Star League was one of the main sort of competitive entities, that students were just signing up as a group under their school name and playing other schools. There were a couple others like Ivy Lowell, which that was Michael Sherman, actually, who's now at Riot, head of TFT and competitive organized play. Um, and the genesis for Robert Morris was I was playing a lot of League of Legends poorly, and you get to, as when you play and you kind of have the same, at least I get piled into the same group of people, and you just, hey, where are you doing? Where are you from? What do I'm like
Yeah.
a lot of college kids, and they were I would like, you tell me what to do. Where should I go? How, what should I be building? Um, and they helped me a ton, and I was like, wow, these kids are really, really good at this game. And it was through League of Legends and the client that I saw they started embracing, when I say they, Riot started embracing college communities, and would do features and stories on some of the college, and they sort of elevated to a light finals situation in 2014, University of Washington, I think it was San Diego. And that's kind of when the light bulb went out again. And I was at Robert Morris as an associate athletic director, and I coached soccer. And I respected the talent and skill of players in traditional athletics and in League of Legends. I
Right.
was like, boy, if there are other colleges to play, we could onboard this as a true sport and provide what I believed was the respect that is due to that endeavor and that sport, League of Legends, and onboard it as if we were adding softball or lacrosse, and not just add another club, right? Because we didn't have a club at Robert Morris. It was a small 2,000 students institution, um, mostly commuter. To be honest, we had about 35% living on campus, downtown
Sure.
Chicago, and the rest were commuters. So um, that was the genesis, right? So I kind of drew up a white paper, brought it to my boss, that got elevated, and then there were many meetings kind of trying to explain and lay out what it looks like and how it would operate, all those sort of things.
Yeah. So as you were kind of explaining out what this might look like, how kind of the program should be structured, who were your biggest supporters on campus and who were your biggest critics?
Yeah, my biggest supporter was our athletic director at the time, Megan Smith Eggert. Um, Robert Morris, and I'd been there so long. I'd been there over 15 years, and
Yeah.
I'd served on some long range plans. I knew our president pretty well. It's not like we went to lunch every day, but we, would pass in the hall and chit chat.
Yeah.
I knew the upper C-level staff, um, and she saw value in it. Robert Morris was a little bit unique. It was an experiential university. That was sort of the theme, where we do externships for every major and program, and leveraging downtown Chicago for like job opportunities and hands-on experiences for students. I would say the biggest sort of question marks came from the C-level suite, right? Of like, whoa, is this going to do damage to the brand, the school? That is this, is the rest of the educational industry going to make fun of us, elevating gaming to a varsity sport? And those again, it seems almost normal now, right? To some degree. I know there are still educational hurdles, right? And truly to understand. But then, right, it was a real risk, and it took a number of meetings and just sort of trying to explain why it makes sense, why it's valid. And I could say I could see the light bulb change moment of our president when in one of the meetings, right? It was okay. Go back, like explain how you think it would operate. What would it look like? What would it take? What are the demographics? What's the industry, gaming industry and esports industry growth trajectory? Those sort of things. How does it fit in the mission and values? All those sort of things.
Right.
But I brought in, and he was a huge supporter of athletics. Huge supporter. Robert Morris had 23 sports across 3 campuses that we managed, and he really believed in the value in like the second classroom of athletics, of right the lifelong learning, the community, the leadership development, discipline. He went to Notre Dame and to Loyola, so both have pretty strong kind of athletic cultures and ideals, and just he loved sports to begin with, and started athletics with Robert Morris actually. But the light bulb moment was in a couple go get bring back meetings. This one I'd brought an iPad with to show. Again, this was early days of LCS too, but if you remember LCS, right, they would have pregame desking, they would have color commentary and play-by-play, and then post-game analysis, right, similar. And I showed him that of professional League of Legends, and I could see the light bulb click in his head, like this is like ESPN, right? And they're just calling a different sport, and that was like the moment. He's like, I get it. Like literally, he was like, I get it. Okay. Now, like what's kind of trying to define, which is really hard, the TAM of, okay, what's North America look like of the player base, and obviously you could kind of get some of that through data on the client. Didn't know the ages, obviously, but it's significant, right? And my biggest point was like that it can't be just halfway. It has to be, fully supported at a level we would if we were adding X sport. Otherwise, it'll fall short and it'll not work, in my opinion. And it worked.
It worked. So what does that full support look like? Because there's no guidebook for you to base this off of, right?
Yeah.
Like, sure, you've got the traditional athletics corollary, which sounds like you're pretty heavily, relying on at this point. But there are unique things about the esports world. Where were those kind of minute differences that you said, no, this is the thing that needs changed, this is how we need to approach this, for whatever reason, whether it be smaller roster sizes or the online medium or whatever?
Yeah, for me, it was definitely competitive was important, right? And I felt like that was part of that respect narrative of onboarding in a similar way, that if we were adding softball, I just use that as whatever sport it is.
Right.
And Robert Morris generally would sort of go as a balance of, like, say, tuition payment would be, full tuition, and then you'd have half tuition, and you'd have a pool of dollars to allocate to attract talent to build a roster. You would get a facility. Now Robert Morris rented all of our facilities. We were literally right across from Harold Washington Library, and that's straight downtown. But we rented facilities at Loyola for basketball. We played there at their arena. Spent a lot of money to sort of operate around Chicago, University of Illinois Chicago, where I played soccer. We played in their field and practiced there. But I felt for esports, we needed a facility on campus, so it was building a facility there. It was hiring a staff that would be able to actually coach and improve, which was not me. So it was, I could oversee it all almost as like an esport athletic director, and then find staff that could actually add value to like a challenger level player. So that was kind of like the how I believe the how it should kind of go. Equipment, right? High level PC equipment and gear, as similar as we would to our athletics teams, right? Where they would identify with athletics and identify with the school. And so outside of just uniforms, training gear, which it sounds a little silly, but it's just like a variety of different T-shirts that are feel relevant, backpack, water bottle as athletics would get, name tag for the backpack, those sort of things, right? Just the little things where they felt like that they were part of. If they look over at one of the soccer players, they're like, oh, they're kind of wearing what I'm wearing, the similar, right? To bring them into that athletic community, and then the broader community of school, and then even Chicago, right? Which Rob Morris saw itself as a big part of that.
It bothers me to no end. It's a requirement for my players to wear their jerseys on match day, but they won't wear them around campus the day before. They only put them on. I'm like, you don't want to show, like, no, it's too cringy. We can't do that. No, come on. But
they wore our hoodies. They wore our hoodies. We made hoodies for them. They loved those. Yeah, wore those around. Yeah, but I would say the uniform here and there were a couple, but yeah, generally that's similar, right? They wouldn't really feel like kind of, but they were proud putting it on game day, right? For sure.
And speaking of hoodies that you might consider wearing around campus, you can cop yourself a cool new hoodie and support college esports news at the same time via our merch store. Visit acquire.ca/CEN and use code CEN for 5% off your order. In addition to those fire hoodies, we have zip-up jackets and a jersey that you can even customize with your gamer tag. For something a bit more casual, you can also check out our graphic tees. You too can be a torchbearer with our OG design. Again, if you're interested, you can order at acquire.ca/CEN and use code CEN for 5% off your order at checkout. Now, back to my conversation with Kurt. Yeah. So how did the students, on that note, kind of take up the mantle for this? How did they react? And to that end, were you, like, in that first kind of year, actively recruiting talent to come in who would not have come to Robert Morris otherwise?
Yeah, well, I would say so. Our first year, we started the fall of 2014, and we had 35 positions in our esport space, 35 PCs, and then 2 for staff. And it's 100% safe to say that 35 came for the program and then school secondary, which isn't, it's sometimes you want to make sure there's a little more of a cohesive mix of like, hey, you're coming downtown Chicago, right? This is the education. These are the programs that we offer, and there needs to be a balance. I've done years and years of recruiting of athletes for soccer and other sports, helping our other sports on campus, and you have to make sure it's a cultural fit and an educational fit and a social fit, because if you come for just one reason out of the 10, it sometimes fails, and then you have a poor experience, and then that just doesn't work all the way around. So yeah, it was 35, and you mentioned how do we find talent? That definitely was for sure not my lane of expertise, or even be able to kind of speak to a challenger or diamond level player and say like, this is what we're going to do for you, and this is how we're going to train. I'm was like a try hard, sweaty player. But we got high level play. We got high level coaches. We had Ferris Gansman. He had done some work with Lemon Dogs and even at Cloud9. Lived in the suburbs of Chicago. Had a couple of meetings with him, and he was awesome. And he dug right in and got high level players to come and join. We had probably, I would say, like 2 teams. So we had RMU black and white, and they were all challenger level, so like 10, which is insane. And again, it's so easy then. I don't want to say easy, but it was the first ever. Right, I was like, oh my
Right.
god.
Yeah, there's not really anyone else that's competing
No, right.
for attention. So if you say, "Hey, we'll pay you, come on over,"
Yeah.
people will probably take it, especially at that age. So when founding the program, what are this program's first guiding principles? At some point you start veering off of what the original set out is, but what are those principles that kind of decide those next level of decisions?
Yeah, our guiding principle was just to provide the opportunity in an athletic program and reward talent, and also have like a development arm, as I mentioned, right? Sort of the balance, and coaches have some discretion on how they um, deploy funds for talent. So it's generally like full scholarship, not including housing. Sometimes could be housing depending, and then like a half scholarship, and then sometimes even like a 25% tuition scholarship um, for talent. So it was obviously our best team that we would have representing Robert Morris in sort of some of the top leagues. Back then it was NECC or ULaw, I forget. I think it was NECC, which was like the Riot kind of hosted. Um, and then we had multiple teams in Collegiate Star League and some of the Ivy Level, a couple of the others. So that was kind of like, hey, we're onboarding this, but then the newness is sort of what was new then was like, hey, there are requirements in athletics to have this scholarship, attendance, behavior, um, sportsmanship, and that was a big learning curve for some. Some got it right away, and some didn't. And for my staff too, it was a learning curve of these are the expectations. This is what an athletic program and a school, right, really writ large, like is required, right? Of you can't go on Discord and you can't. There's no Discord, TeamSpeak, and demolish other players and make fun of just there were a number of
Right.
things where it's like, hey, listen, there's a behavioral code, right? And that was part of, because they were fully in athletics, so that was just part of any athlete coming in, right? There was a behavioral code of conduct that they were signing, and I'm sure that not many read it, but I was like, hey, you better look at that before you sign, right? Because it doesn't mean just here in our esports space, right? In our where we're competing and practicing. It's also in the dorms. It's also what you're doing on the weekend and what you're posting on social media and
Right.
how you're interacting with other stakeholders, whether that's the security lady at Walgreens down the road. It's just a higher bar of behavior, and that was I think a learning curve a little bit here and there. But I've had many as associate athletic director, and then as a coach, I've had to go through that many times, right? And academics, right? Like there was eligibility that we were checking and grade checking, also new. So that was kind of the newness, right? And as we evolved as a program, right, we kind of put in the any code key, um, where we would sort of have sign off like, hey, we're gonna respect each other, and you're gonna respect genders, you're gonna respect those sort of things. Our first year we had 2 females and I think 33 males. And I coached women's soccer for all those years, so that wasn't a feel good thing really. I was like, man,
Yeah.
I think it's just the opportunity is missing, to be honest, outside of like the want. And there's social barriers that probably are preventing, like, well, should I? But anyways, that's still a problem, right? That's everyone's trying
Right.
to work on or solve.
Yeah.
But I think universities are a perfect place to address and try to help bridge that. Um,
Yeah.
but that's one of, as 100 things that I'm trying to solve across the space.
Add it to the episode topic
Yeah,
list, as we
right.
keep going along with this,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's certainly on our radar, as well, and a lot of folks have come up with interesting solutions there, but, so moving along, obviously within the first year, this attracts a whole bunch of media attention.
Yeah.
ESPN's covering you. You do your own AMA on Reddit, where you ask folks, if they have any questions on the league subreddit to ask you directly.
Yeah.
Riot puts a little spot on and has their documentary. How did that media attention uh, either help or hinder the growing program? I mean, 'cause that's not something that any of us have to deal with now. We found a new program and it's like, all right, well, that's the next one in the
10,
sea of others.
looking back, it was overwhelming. And to
Yeah.
be honest, and to be honest, just again, I kind of talked about how I saw it and I wanted to add it as to respect the sport. And this is, I sort of had barriers that I wouldn't go below of like, this is the way it has to get done. And I thought for sure there may be a little media attention from a local newspaper, not any of the majors, right? Just like, oh, hey, this small school
Yeah, right.
adds League of Legends as a varsity sport, and about like I was like that kind of be cool, and the school would probably be interested in that.
Right.
But it was an avalanche. It was I think it was just the perfect storm of right around then. HBO Real Sports did a thing on Riot when they sold out Staples Center, um, and there was all this frenzy around gaming and esports, and it was nearly 2 times a week, major, minor publications coming in, global. Like it was overwhelming. And to your point, did it help or hinder? I think in one sense it helped college esports just because I think the awareness was blasted out of right, and then I had an early narrative which still holds true, like, hey, this is providing opportunity for a new subset of students that aren't really embraced, and blah blah blah, as we know, all
Yeah.
that same narrative. But the negative was, we had high level teams playing, and that's who they wanted to talk to all the time, right? So I would always try to get some players to during school day or during practice, and they were excited about it at first, but the 28th time is just right. They're like, and the stress of the season and everything else and school. So it got to be a hindrance to it. And going back, I probably should have done a better job of just kind of shielding and saying like, hey, listen, if you're interested in that, we're having a media day in 3 weeks. Here it is. Love you to come. Full access, everything. But I was just kind of excited when you know uh, a major a major Spanish newspaper, kind of like the New York Times, and they're going to do like a video component to it and a major story. Like, okay, gosh, I can't put her off. I can't put them off.
Yeah.
But I should have, to be honest. Like, so that was, looking back, I wish I would have done that. Would have done the program, would have better served the program and our players.
You can imagine that with each one, you feel like, oh, well, it has to be there, has to be there. And
Yeah,
there was
right.
never a good time to say no, probably.
Yeah, you just don't know when it's going to end, right? You're like, oh wow, okay,
Yeah.
this might, like, okay, let's but it just went on for 2 years, like 2 years, and it became a little less, um, not 2 a week. It was then one a week, right? And then it was like one
Yeah.
every 2 weeks, but still some majors, right? Like that were late to it, I guess. I don't know. Craziness. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy.
So aside from the consistent media attention, what did the day to day look like in those early days? I mean, it sounds like, again, very athletics based, where you're, you know, scheduling your students in for classes, they come in for practice. Is it consistent practices for them, like every day, akin to athletics, or where does that kind of fall in the grand scheme?
Yeah, it was for our varsity kind of programs. It was every day. And for our sort of secondary teams, it was, I think, our early learning that we then instilled was, I think it was like 3 times a week. That sort of that load was too much. But for challenger level players, like if they're not organized in the space, they're just going to be in their dorm room, right? Then my day to day still was, right. I was responsible for a bunch of other sports as associate athletic director. The school was nice enough to really kind of lean in to help the coaching side of things, where I had staff that had been with me for years and years, and they were able to assume some of that work. I was still involved there, but it was really just sort of the managing the media. It was making sure students are on the path to success and having success, so school, and then it was
Right.
pulling kids out to, then I would sort of lay the law down and make them go to a study hall to, and then be in touch with their teachers, because this is new to our staff too, right? Of how do you bring someone in a study hall? What do you have to say? What do you have to do?
Yeah.
But we had a staff of 6, none full time, that were sort of on each, overseeing each team, and then I would hear from them if there were any issues that had to get elevated to me, whether that's, hey, this player knows this player, and recruiting for the next year, or solving any kind of family or health or academic issues or behavioral issues. That was kind of my day to day. It was wild. It was wild because there were a lot of explaining of how things need to look to our students. And again, right, as you know, the sometimes the discipline of a team and a team sport is new, and the expectations that come along with that, right? Like, hey, if there's a team practice, you can't just waltz in 15 minutes after, like that. Like,
Yeah.
that's disrespectful to your teammates, really, at the core. And that was trying to build that culture of, like, be a good teammate. That at the core of it all is, like, which involves being a good person, right? And
Yeah.
and supporting each other, and taking it seriously, and doing everything you have to do so you're able to play on the weekends. Just building that culture and the expectations of what it means being involved with the scholastic team. And I think we spent time with our coaches and our staff, and kind of learning that and understanding. They were a little bit older. They weren't that old. We had, Ferris Gansman was already working, like at Siemens in the suburbs. We had like we had a lawyer, and we had a couple that were getting their masters, right? So they're a little bit older, and kind of bought into the vision. But they had to learn how to operate a team too, right? And how to manage a team, and personalities within a team. Not easy.
Yeah. Right. Not at all. And
No.
to that point, I think a lot of us will hear, "Oh, you have to build the culture," that's what we've been trying to do. But without a guidebook, how did you do that? I guess
Right.
that's the thing that I'm most curious. Like, I have my methods I try, and then,
Yeah.
maybe questionably work at times. But when there is like a dedicated thing that you want to see happen, how do you make sure that that environment is what's nurtured in your program?
Yeah. It was a lot of, I would say, and again, I adopted to what I believe, and building cultures on teams that I coached, and through athletics, and what works, and how that gets created. And it's not a top down sort of like, I am instilling culture on you. Here's the culture. You eat it, and then there it is. It's finding behaviors that you can support and elevate, and sort of model within. Right now, again, if you have 35 sort of problematic, ego driven, that don't want to buy into any kind of like, it's really hard to do. But if you
Sure.
have one on a team of 6 with a sub, right, generally, like, if the rest are sort of modeling and are sort of leveling an expectation, and that team culture can hopefully come from within. And there's always going to be tweaks, and say, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't talk like that. Here's a better way to think about this, instead of lashing out, and right, and in a bad moment in the game. That's kind of how I would just approach. And I you know played enough competitive video games that's no different, right, than in a traditional sport. Like, it's just you prove leadership by doing, to be honest, right? It's not like, I'm the leader, we do so because I say so. That never that As soon as you
Yeah.
say that, doesn't work, right? That's like, you could say, like, you've lost the plot almost, in a way. But you it's through servant leadership, right? It's through, like, what can I do to help you, to elevate you, to help the rest, right? That's leadership. So But it takes time, right? It takes time, and it takes those moments of learning in the environments of, hey, and then if things will go wrong, then if you can bring it to, hey, what, how could we have all handled this better? And I'm not perfect either.
Yeah.
So it's tough, right? But I modeled to your I guess get back to your, it was like, was really just what's worked on athletic teams, what I believed translates, and it's different certainly, but I think those core tenets of team translate, and no matter what it is, almost.
I think many of us forget about that action perspective because we are living in an online space and ecosystem.
Sure.
We're not sitting most often, our experience when we
Right.
first learned these games and how to play in this kind of setting,
Sure.
even in a coordinated team environment at all, it was online playing with a couple of friends that happened to think that entering a tournament this week was fun.
Yeah.
And there's not that, like, in that culture, there is not a show up 30 minutes ahead of time, do your aim drills
Right.
well before match time, so we're in lobby ready to go on match time. There's none of that, right? And it's hard to even show. Like, what are you going to do? Join the TeamSpeak call 30 minutes early?
Yeah.
No, probably not, right? You're going to eat your dinner while you're doing whatever else you need to do, and then get on right when you need to,
That's a really
because
good point.
there's no incentive.
Yeah.
And so I think in our ecosystem where a lot of us are still in person, I think there is enough that you can demonstrate with that in person
Yeah.
play, and how you interact with your facility, and how
Hmm.
you show up, and how you present yourself. Those sorts of things that I think a lot of us could use a little reminder on from, and steal the page from the athletics book.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because in our practices, and again, our dorms were literally right across Congress, so right across the street were the dorms from our campus. But for our practices, I noticed a little bit of leakage of, like, oh, well, there's four here, and like, where's this guy? Well, he's gonna play from the dorms, and I'm like, no, 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 right? Like, because of all those things you said, right? Like,
Yeah.
no, no, like, yes, everything can be facilitated. I'm sure there can be high level play and you can communicate, but it's all those ancillary things of body language, and um, you could type the same sort of sentiment in, but is that digested the same way as if through saying it, right? Like, what's the tone? There's no tone in chat, right? Um, that was the big thing, and I know that it's a spicy topic, collegiate esports, of in person or online. But for my program, I believe sort of to in the development of not improvement in game, but development of the human, that in person was a really, really important part of that. Now there are some that I think can be conveyed, right, virtually, um, and it's not impossible, but just for me, like, I think that is a key component to sort of developing teams, and then developing people, and developing leaders and teammates, and
Yeah.
that culture.
You're going to make me pull out my higher education buzzwords for a moment, but
Yeah, right.
how are you going to build belongingness in your students when they're coming in from their dorm rooms, or they're in a commuter setting coming from their actual homes, signing on to Discord, hopping in a call with their teammates supposedly, and then the second the practice is done, they hang up on the call. There's no social activity, there's no casual conversation or jokes you make on the side, while no one's paying attention. I think you're absolutely on the mark that
Yeah,
in person component is huge in terms of building them, especially college students at this kind of age.
yeah. You can't. That's the human element, right? Like,
Yeah,
we are, we're social beings, and there's a mass percent of communication that happens non-verbally. It just does, right?
yes,
And I noticed that as a traditional sport coach, and you could see a change if you're at a halftime of whatever sport, if you kind of are able to just sort of hit the points, and kind of inspire a little bit, and you can see the belief change. And it's hard to do if it's just in chat, or if it's just audio sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm on board with you there.
All right, let's refocus back to what those early days looked like.
Sure.
Who else were your partners first kicking off the program. I imagine IT was on that list somewhere
Yeah,
along the way.
IT was a partner. And again, you have to remember, right? This is not like UWGB even. It's a small school,
Yeah.
right? Like 1,700 maybe all in, and that's including like master's degree
Yeah,
students.
right.
So it's small. So it was unique that I knew everybody that I had to know pretty well, and I'd been there a long time. So
Yeah.
um, the president was always, again, like really excited about the program just because he believed in athletics, and there was a little worry of, what's the brand? Is the brand going to take a hit because it's such a unique kind of concept? But once, generally, I think it was positively seen, and the media too was positive. So if there were any big problems, I was able to to elevate it, which is also unique, right? As we know. Now I came from, like you were saying, in Chicago. I coached there for a while, so I know the matrices of red tape and
Yeah.
siloing of departments and groups, and how difficult that can be. So I don't say it flippantly because I think everyone else is like, that's not fair. But I was just able to kind of create a lot of positive relationships to the program because of a lot of the media attention that Robert Morris got, and our success competitively, um, and the future of what it could be down the road. So there, I would say, you mentioned that Reddit AMA, the there was still, even though we onboarded with significant scholarship staff, facility built, there was a pretty significant pushback just from the internet of like, this is terrible, this is bogus. One from league players, like, oh, well, they just want to take your tuition money, and this is a joke, and this is a hoax, and everything else. And then one from traditional sports of like, how are you adding this when a lot of institutions are cutting tennis? I got a lot of hate mail from programs that were canceled or pulled back, wrestlers, like, of just, you're ruining the culture of America. And then just, like, it was definitely five negative to one positive. Some random, like,
Right.
gamer in Moldova is like, this is great. So that was, like, a little bit like, yikes.
Yeah,
I think,
right.
but I still believed in it. It didn't change anything, right? It's just I'm like, okay, I have to explain this better, of the whys of the
Right.
program, right? And what it's trying to do, right? Which was not like, we want to increase enrollment and we're going to have 100 competitive gamers. It was really just onboarding it and trying to provide value to the student, no matter the level. And we wanted a high level team, so certainly, but we wanted players that wanted to get better too.
Yeah.
And service them through education of League of Legends to how to get better, and then play competitive matches, and then be part of the program, which was also important to me, right? Like, I could have easily built just 10, right? And we got 10 challenger players, and the rest beat it. But
Right.
coming from, as a video game fan, I know that it is about culture and community, right? Like, yeah, I was an athlete, but I was also a nerd. I was like a hybrid. Like, I went to Combo Breaker before it was Combo Breaker here in Chicago.
Right.
Just to, not to play, just to watch.
Yeah.
Because I would get smashed, but I loved seeing high level play. And I knew, right, that that's the culture of gaming is not just League of Legends. That it's I play other games too. I love League of Legends, but embracing the community around it too, and providing opportunity for them, it was important.
Yeah. So speaking of kind of embracing community, I think one of the things that I remember from my early days in collegiate, which was not this early, but was a handful of years ago, was the developer support. How did those relationships with the developers evolve as more programs like yours started picking up true varsity teams? And what was their kind of buy-in, and what did those relationships look like?
Yeah, that's an interesting sort of storyline, right? So, I think, again, this was sort of around the frenzy, 2014, 15, 16, of like esports as an industry. Where if you remember way back, I want to say it was like 2016 when MLB BAM, which then became kind of ESPN online, and HBO Go, was like bought the rights to LCS, right, for like an insane amount of money, similar to MLS broadcast rights. And right, it was like, oh my gosh. So I think publishers were like, oh my gosh, okay, I could see this starting to build. And part of my efforts along with media was just receiving tons and tons of school inbound, like, okay, what is this, how does it work? Because I'm and there were some that were saying like, hey, don't just share everything, right? Carve it out, create this thing. I'm like, doesn't, like, if there's one of one, it doesn't matter, like that. Like, it's a nothing.
Right.
Then you have to kind of help others to grow the whole thing, because that creates massive amount of, right, opportunity across it. Like, it's probably not, although even though that first year we had players from all over the world almost, but generally kids stay somewhere in the region, right? So growing the opportunity set and helping schools onboard was really, took a lot of time, but it was important. But the publishers, I'd reached out literally because in 2014 I was like, okay, well, I have to let Riot know that this is, I'm planning on doing this, because they could be like, no, not our game, you can't do that. Like, literally they probably could do that. I filled out a ticket. I didn't know who to reach out to. I filled out a ticket, like I got my account suspended or something.
Right.
And then like a week later, and this was like early of 14, a week later, they got like, okay, well, I don't understand what you mean, because I said, like, this is what I want to do. Like, okay, you have a club that you want? I'm like, no. And then they're like, can we get on call? And then there was like a bunch of calls later. And they were like, this is great. We're going to put this on front page of client. And you mentioned, right, they had come for a couple doc series because they're like, this is great. If we amplify this, other schools will add and kind of outline how great it is. And it did. Publishers, though, then really leaned in. If like around PAX East in 2000, was it 15 or 16? It must have been 15. During PAX East, Riot had a massive booth. This is when they had the Rift Walk, and they stood up. There was sort of some interest. There were already Big Ten clubs around Big Ten schools, and I think Penn State reached out and said, "Hey, we're thinking about hosting a LAN for some other Big Ten." They're like, "Hey," Riot took it over and made this massive splash of Michigan State. I think it was against Ohio State. It might have been Ohio State even. The clubs, but put it. There were 3,000 at least, maybe more people like standing and watching this show match. So Riot saw the success of that, and I think that game got 60,000 plus views on Twitch.
Wow.
Massive, right? Because it was like, oh my God, this is Michigan State and Ohio State, Big Ten Invitational.
Yeah.
Then Riot went and supported the Big Ten with Big Ten Network partnership for 2 or 3 years. That Riot paid for all the production, paid for the scholarship, stood up competitive League of Legends through NECC, ULOL, then the next iteration. At the same time, knowing publishers are competitive, this was around Heroes of the Storm, which I love that game, by the way. Rest in peace. That was around Heroes of the Dorm, if you remember that. That was a massive prize pool of full tuition for 4 years, commitment to the winning team, and that was 2 or 3 years. That was live on, maybe not live, but it was on ESPN, which again just sort of built this frenzy of esports. And there were a couple other publishers. There were that sort of, there was a game called Vainglory. They put a lot of money into Scholastic, but there weren't a whole lot of people playing that. So it just kind of shows that there has to be the play group first. There has to be the community grassroots. You can't top down an esport. Very difficult to do. But then over time, and I don't want to bracket. I'll bracket a timeline. I think through COVID it was very difficult for schools and publishers. Well, not publishers. They thrived, but understanding how to support. But the BTN thing went away. The schools were like, well, we can't prize, right? We can't award prize money. This was before NIL, because that is, a bad look for schools in the lens of athletics. And actually at that time I was consulting at Intersport for the NCAA related to gaming. But started reducing pricing, which I think is an okay thing, as long as there's this balance of like support coming from collegiate, that you can prove that it's being sort of taken on by schools, and that's one of the 100 issues, right? Of like, okay, well, what's actually the merit based, and what's the $300 stipend to fill out
Yeah,
the application. Um,
right.
but then, sort of as esports, I think as an industry, sort of winter, whatever, however you want to encapsulate that esports winter, or sort of like receive sponsorship. I think Overwatch League was probably not a great sort of lead product, sort of in the how hype esports can be, sort
Yeah.
of as a commercial engine. Um, then we saw some tightening across it all, and really almost like an offloading, sadly, which I still have a little bit of a discontent about, because I think we're when I say we're college esports, right? That we're promoting the product like at a big scale, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
I don't think it's, and again, I get that college esports is not going to monetize for a big publisher, right? It's they're not able to go to Honda or State Farm and say like, look, 37 viewers, it's amazing. It's
Yeah,
Green Bay against Marquette.
yeah,
Um,
right.
but but I think what's missing is what's created for publishers is a lifelong kind of brand value, because of the brick and mortar existence and the integration of University of Green Bay as an example. They're on the lead team. They're playing League of Legends or whatever title it might be, Rocket League, and they will be, I'm guessing, playing that in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years after they've graduated. They will still
As
probably
long as
be,
the servers stay online.
yes, and have a relationship with the school and the product and the
Yeah,
game, and same way as I have relationships with the college players I played with, and the sport, like that is so unique and such a value add that just gets dismissed so easily. And I've tried, I was on RSAA, and it doesn't really exist anymore, but of like, can you get a data team internally, and sort of, can you measure the, because now we have 10 plus years, right, of varsity, like, can you
yeah,
measure like the post grad, we know who was in, and see compared to an average cohort, a student, like, that help measure, that helps say like, look, this creates really really sticky customers. But again, that's the sad part, and I think it will, I believe, as long as you're all building still, that the value will return, and there's some really kind of interesting things happening, like, but overall I think it's an era of stagnation, which is sad,
yeah,
not from those that are doing. People are bleeding, like yourself, Sheridan, bleeding to kind of create these narratives, and to build it
yeah.
up, and build it out. um and that will return rewards over time, I believe.
Yeah.
It's just getting through this kind of part of kind of the wheel spinning.
I think you're right that there's some level of stagnation. I mean, uh, in some ways, I think uh, both somewhat collegiate, but predominantly the primary esports industry ballooned too quickly.
Yeah,
And everyone thought that exponential growth was going to happen forever,
yeah.
and suddenly it has stopped. And I think that reality sinking in has been kind of part of the cause. Of course, we here at College Esports News love telling the untold stories in our industry. That said, we can't do it without your support. We want to make this semester incredible, but obviously we can't do it alone. So we're crowdfunding this semester to help cover our operational costs. These expenses include services that keep our processes operating smoothly and upgrades to help level up our coverage, including, hopefully, at some live events. To do so, you can visit paypal.me/collegenews to tip now. As we reach different funding milestones, we'll be providing the following community incentives. At $500, CEN will host community game nights and watch parties throughout the semester for fall 2025. At $1,000, we'll cook up some new merch designs to add to our store. And at $1,500, we'll record a bonus episode of Torchbearers to give you a behind the scenes of how CEN was founded and the journey it's taken with Sheridan herself. And on top of that, if you give an individual tip of $10 or more, you can submit a clip for a CEN caster to Shoutcast. The link to the form to submit your clip will be in the description down below. If you've appreciated any of the work we've done here at CEN, a small tip can go a long way to make a difference for the work that we get to do for this space. Again, the place to do so is at paypal.me/collegenews. No spaces or no hyphens. Thank you so much for your support and consideration. Now, back to my discussion with Kurt. But I imagine at some point along the way, you're talking about the athletics model heavily for RMU, talking about how those look. At some point during the program's lifespan, I'm sure the values started to change a little bit. Did those changes start to happen to the program while you were there?
Yeah, I could say so. Again, it started in 2014. That was the first for us program. 2015 had a lot of success. Made to League of Legends finals again.
Right.
And then 2016, I had stepped away full time at Robert Morris to go to Intersport, which is a sports marketing firm in Chicago. I got to know that group pretty well through this kind of these 2 years
Right.
to kind of lead esports and gaming kind of a division internally there. But I still was oversaw like the team, so our staff there, right? But it wasn't the day to day, and
Sure.
that was sort of part of the change, right? Because again, I'd been there so long at 2014, 15, I could have fixed any problem going right to the top and proving it out, right? Through some work, like through data and say like this is what I see in 3 years. But when I left full time, right, the staff was still there, but I think that was the opportunity for the school to be like, well, do we have to really do X, Y, and Z? Maybe we can cut here, or we could do this there. And then, my voice was not as significant. Again, because I was there 3 times a week, maybe 2 times
Yeah.
a week sometimes
Right.
if I was traveling. Um, there was demand enough to build out our facility, and I fought the fight to just our existing space to build it out to another classroom. They wanted 2 spaces, just because it fit what they had available. I was like, that's really problematic. So that was some of the slide, I think, of just sort of
Sure.
of operating at a level that I believed was, elite, that was playing at University of Loyola basketball, right? Like of that kind of
Yeah.
tier. So that was difficult. So that was kind of where I saw some of the change. But I still, we added games, and they probably added too many early. We added heroes, which was fine because I think that made sense. Added Dota, that didn't make sense. There's not a whole lot of sort of U.S. kids that are playing Dota. I don't think it's really so. But I think there was someone just looked at a graph of look at the international. Wow.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
so then when that doesn't have success, right, and it's put on sort of the staff that's there, it's like, uh-oh. It's like,
Yeah.
and I said, like,
Right.
that doesn't make sense. They're like, more. And right, like you have to have a
Oh
strong
yeah.
voice, and you have to be able to um almost half the time is like say no to protect what
Yeah.
exists.
Yep.
Then it's just say, okay, we're gonna add. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't exponentially grow forever. At some
Exactly.
point, you start
Exactly.
slowing
Right.
down a little bit.
Yeah, you slow down, or
Uh,
you expand where you're not getting. Again, the measure was like the value to the student. Is the student experience, are they getting value? If they're a 25% scholarship, are they getting value from their experience? Right? Are they growing? Are they getting what they need? Um, do they feel like they're part of a team? Do they feel like they're improving? Do they have a relationship with the program and the coach? Like that's the thing, right? Like so, um, that's always the measure for any kind of, I think, sport or any endeavor.
yeah. So, out of curiosity, you obviously had a long career coaching in the athletic department. We talked about recruiting, talked about a little esports stint, right? Uh, But across all of that, obviously, you transitioned out to go more marketing, consulting, client work, those sorts of things. What things did you personally take away from your time leading the esports program that you kind of were able to transition into, some of the other work that you've done since in your career?
Yeah, I think it's I think where transitioned well for me was leadership. Um, again, I'd been a head coach for a long time. I oversaw coaches and an athletic department. I knew how to speak in front of people. And that really served me well to sort of stand up again, like gaming and esports for and the sports marketing content kind of property division um, marketing firm. Um, and a lot of that was similar of explaining this is and to be honest was a lot of saying no to ideas that would come through like no, but here's why, and this is what instead, right, would probably work, whether that's brands, VC groups, our CEO at Intersport, um, and just right, that's not going to be successful and not going to monetize well like you think, whether that's building an esport team or investing in a team or some kind of platform. Um, so really just decision making and being able to kind of cut through the clutter and see, cut through the noise and see the truth. And then being able to have the leadership to push that through, and say, this is a way forward, right? Or tell the truth to brands, um, and help them get, meet what they want to accomplish in this space. And then if it's, if I'd rather have them, when I say them, any group, right, to um, do something authentically and have success rather than sort of like something that's superfluous and it may have hype around it, but that's really, you just know at the end of the day it's going to not do well and fail.
Right.
It might have some vanity metrics, but over time it's just going to be so.
Yeah.
But that takes a little bit of being able to say like, no to significant whatever, right? Like brand value or money or whatever, and say like, this is the way.
Yeah. So it sounds like overall, perhaps one of the things is learning how to say no, and here's
And
why.
yeah, and prove it out, and then but saying no is easy, but then saying no, but what about this, right? Like and
Yeah.
providing a solution that's still adjacent, right? And will still deliver
Yeah.
from whatever the goal is, right? And that's same as really like any kind of college esports director, like that is the X factor, right? Of like if you think about all the stakeholders that you're servicing, right? Like the main one that often gets left off is your institution and the leadership there, right? Because it's like the emperor on in the castle, right? Like that is
Yeah.
like that group is can make or break, and having to translate and making sure that they're aware of what's happening, and some of their vision and goals are being accomplished and how are they being accomplished, and that's sometimes because, and I'm not blaming. It's hard, right? Because there's
Yeah.
so much on your plate, right? As you know,
Oh,
so
yeah.
much, and that's not top of mind. You're like, oh, this kid needs this. We had this
Yep.
games coming up, and but if you could kind of like look at the macro, that is a really really important piece.
Yeah. To that point, I'm now, I think, starting to do once a week exercise where I list out every single one of my teams and what they all need from me.
Yeah.
And
Oh
then
gosh,
trying to prioritize who needs
long
what in
list, long
addition
list.
to the other projects that are happening. Yeah, right. Ends up being quite a bit. Can fill up the whole page, as it
Yeah.
turns out. But that's the way it goes, and that's why we do what we do, right? Um, so I guess in summation, kind of in conclusion here, uh, I wasn't around in the early days. By and large, I was still learning that esports existed at all when your program was first founded. Uh, what would you say that modern day directors, program leaders, even student club presidents can learn from where we came from?
Yeah. Wow. Um, Gosh, I this sounds a little nebulous, but you, there isn't a one size fits all, I guess I could say. And you have to, I guess the learning is kind of going back to just what we were speaking about is what's important to your institution and what are they trying to accomplish and what can a program add, and it maybe it is just similar to an academic club or an elevated intramural sport, and that will check the box for doing gaming and esports in that institution, and they're happy about, and that's kind of all they need and all they're looking for. Then you know understand that going in, and then over deliver on what that looks like and how that operates, and make sure the universe on campus knows about it, and are there ways to integrate other pieces and parts, right? Or are they excited about, say, University of Green Bay, the Phoenix beating uh, Madison, right? Like University of
Yeah.
right of Wisconsin. Is that important to them? Right? That brand value of yours, like we killed them in Rocket League, like, and we have the last 3 times. And you can meme out
We
sort of
wish.
Phoenix over the bat, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is. But just understanding that, right? Like, and it, I think too often that macro level of delivering the value potential and the goals of even starting can get lost, right? If you go into an environment where they're like, we're going to have this closet and you can wear these old T-shirts and here's these PCs and we could say it's intramural, but you have dreams of kind of competing at CLOL and CVAL, and you want resources, then you're going to be frustrated. And maybe that's not the space you should go, and right, and even in a build scenario, right, really difficult to start from like that level.
Right.
So understanding that and understanding how to, and I'm sure you've done some of this, right? Like who are the stakeholders on campus that can be your champions to kind of leverage and sort of go talk about it outside of yourself, right? And the program that can advocate internally for you, and find more of those, and then build that group, and then right, that's what I had automatically because I'd been there so long and been on, right? So like that doesn't come automatically. But that's an important piece to unlocking kind of how you envision a long term, how you want your program or your ideal Nirvana situation of your program, because it's there. It's just you have to shape their vision to see it through your program.
Yeah. Really fantastic advice. I think the big picture is so important,
Yeah,
and being able to step back from that
and
30,000-foot
everyone doing
view,
so much work. Like, listen, I know it's hard, especially a
especially
big
this time of
school.
year.
Yeah, right, and the macro environment of higher ed, right?
Yeah.
It's really difficult. Competitive environments, NIL, like it's a squeeze. It's a squeeze on
Yep.
institutions, the research funding of kind of that tier one research groups. Like it is tough. It's tough. The discretion funds of like, oh yeah, okay, let's build this thing, see how it goes. It's a tough environment. So,
Yeah.
um, but keep building. It's worth it. I do believe. I think we all believe that over time, like it's real. Like, and
Yeah.
it's not just going to be a pool table in the rec room, right? Like it's
Right.
has much more than meaning and institutional meaning than that. Um, so keep going. That's all I could say.
Keep going from one of our founders is that just replace it with the Energizer Buddy. That's all we need. Not a
I think
sponsor.
we still see some interesting things like D1 and PC are
Yep.
really interesting, right? I think if we all keep working and prove the value to publishers, I think they should play a bigger role in supporting and telling the stories outside. You and shared it, like they have an important role to play, and I hope they come back around. Like I believe so. I hope so. But they're not going to do it. A squeaky wheel gets the grease, to be honest. Like in some
Yeah.
of those instances.
Right. Well, maybe you alluded to it, maybe not. But the last question we'd like to ask every guest that comes on the show is if you could snap your fingers to change one thing about college esports, what would it be?
Support. Um, and I wish there was support, and I wish there was a foundation level of how, right? Of a minimum level of how, right? And what that means, whether that's facility, whether that's staffing, whether that's merit-based scholarship, or however you want to frame that, whether that's institutional help and broadcasting that and explaining that and storytelling around that, whether that's website and similar to what D1 does now. And that was part of the narrative of why I believe that there was value in NCAA, kicking tires and potentially building, is that if you add any of the institutions where anyone is operating collegiate esports, if they add, I'm going to use softball as an example, right? They're not putting their team in old jerseys and giving them worn out bats, right? And putting them in a closet or in a rec park down the road. There's a baseline of have to, right? This is the minimum. And then, of course, scholarships can vary, amount of staff can vary, travel, all those sorts of things. But they're traveling to games like lands, right? There's a minimum. It doesn't exist in our space, right? We have to reinvent and prove out and explain in a new situation, or even an existing situation, of why traveling to, say, like 5 regional lands are important, and the cost and that already exists. So support in all facets and all parts and pieces, I think, is one thing that I think could be, if I could snap my finger, I would snap it multiple times.
Well, Kurt,
and that's part of the reason for voice, right? Like of like getting higher level leaders, like presidents, involved to try to care or pay attention to, right? Absent NCAA involvement or any kind of significant body.
I wish we had another hour to talk about voice, but alas, we do not. Kurt, I could not imagine a better guest for our return to Torchbearers here on this show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any other closing thoughts or shout outs, floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, if anyone's happy to try to help anyone out there. Like I've been kind of out of formal collegiate, but I still know the how to, or at least the things to think about. So happy to help. I've done hundreds in the past, and I could leverage a team of voice to help if there's something that makes sense where you need help. But I want to say thank you for everything you do here. I think this is really important. And Sheridan's awesome. And I know it's a labor of love, but I do think these platforms and telling the stories are really important. So thank you for everything you do.
Well, thank you for continuing to support us. I'm just the guy that shows up to talk for an hour. It's Sheridan that should get all the credit here all together, but she is. Kurt, thanks so much again for joining us, and looking forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Take care, Sam. Bye-bye.
You just listened to an episode of Torchbearers by College Esports News. Thanks so much again to our guest, Kurt Melcher, for joining us. As always, I was your host, Kenneth Christina. Tom Screech collaborated as a writer on this episode. V. Tran is our editor. Sheridan Shea helped record this conversation, and Derek Santiago is creative director of CEN. Be sure to follow CEN on X, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram to stay up to date on all things college esports, and check out our website at collegeesportsnews.org. If you liked this episode, please engage with it on social media or send it to a friend. And if you liked it so much that you'd consider supporting us, you can visit our merch store at acquire.ca/CEN or give us a tip at paypal.me/collegeenews. Thanks for listening, and keep carrying the flame.